Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the course, The Buddhist Path of Awakening. Let's start by bowing in. So, we're working our way through the profound treasury of the ocean of Dharma. Tonight, Michael and I will be presenting. I'm going to go first, and then Michael will follow. And we are on volume 3 now, third volume, chapter 16, entitled Fundamental Magic. These 3 volumes are digests of talks that were given by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche over a period of about 15 years. Every year he would take a group of his students away for what was called Vajradhatu Seminary for 3 months. And during that period of time, they would practice and study. Every night during the study periods, he would lecture. The 3 months were pretty much divided randomly but equally between study and practice. He liked to make it irregular. And the first month was devoted to the Hinayana teachings of the lesser vehicle, or foundational vehicle as he preferred to call it. The second month was devoted to the Mahayana, the greater vehicle teachings, and the third month to the Vajrayana. And these have been digested into these 3 volumes of the profound treasury of the ocean of Dharma. Volume 1 is Hinayana, 2 Mahayana, and 3 Vajrayana, and we are on volume 3. And so we'll start tonight with fundamental magic. This is getting very profound. So he says that the first section is about the unification of emptiness, shunyata, and compassion, karuna, using the Sanskrit terms for those. And he says that as potential Vajrayana persons, we're expected to have already understood shunyata. That doesn't mean that we're living it, but we have some idea of what it is, that it's the sphere of reality, and that in that reality, I and other are just fictions. They are part of a story that is continually being told about a drama in which I and other figure. But in reality, in the present moment, they have no true existence. They're just constant changing presentations, like this gesture of this hand, like these words coming out of my mouth. They appear and disappear in the instant. They don't even last at all. A constant sort of display, a fictional display, you might say. And we're meant to have understood that, and that in living in this world and beginning to contact it, we come in touch with a deeper meaning of compassion. Compassion now means, at a sort of a beginning level, that we have sympathy for those who don't understand this yet and are still living completely bound by the rules of I and other, by the dramas with which we describe our lives. And that also, what begins to happen as we step into this world is that natural compassion, meaning love, affection for the world, intensifies and grows within us. It's no longer obscured by the constant anxieties of self-protection and self-aggrandizement. Those are beginning to wear out, beginning to wear away, and in their place, the beauty of this world inspires us. And so, he says, as potential Vajrayana persons, we're expected to have understood this, if only intellectually, or perhaps a bit more than intellectually. He says, in the Vajrayana, we take the attitude that our basic nature, which is enlightened, which is Buddha nature, bodhicitta, awakened mind, is already in the process of full realization. It's not regarded as a potentiality. It's here. It's coming clearer as we begin to wear away the obscurations of these mistakes that we've been making all the time. Mistakes about belief in I and other and worry about I, constant. So we begin to experience the unification of emptiness, which is reality, this, devoid of I and other, and compassion. First comes shunyata, emptiness. Emptiness of thought, because thought is always what I and other are doing. And when we give up the belief and we start coming back from those thoughts, those games that we play, those dramas of love and hate and passion and aggression and ignoring, then we begin to discover the emptiness of thought and also the absence of belief in oneself and one's basic core of bewilderment. He says, that basic core of bewilderment that we feel, and what's this world all about? Where am I going? What's going to happen when I die? All of that begins to dissolve because we begin to develop trust in the reality of this world here and now and settle into that, relax into that. So shunyata, the twofold egolessness, is empty of I and empty of other. And he says, and we begin to develop a quality of brilliance. Seeing beyond dualistic fixations, we begin to understand their absence, which reveals a tremendous spark or brightness taking place. When we're involved with these dualistic fixations, as he puts it, meaning belief in I and belief in other, and the constant games that go on between them of love, hate, and stupidity. When we're involved in those we have all these thoughts. I like this person, I'm that person, it makes me mad. I don't care about the other. And we have these thoughts and they gray out the world. You could walk down the street lost in thought and you barely see what's passing by you. Someone might call your name when you're lost in thought and you wouldn't even hear them. So thought is what he calls kuntak. That's the word, Tibetan word for thought, grays out the world. And when we begin to give it up and come back into awareness of this now, here and now, we begin to see the world much more, at first just clearly, and eventually brilliantly. Colors and shapes are much more brilliant, alive, colorful, bright, clear, sharp. It's like sometimes you just wake up and you look around and the world is just shining. This is what happens within emptiness. Emptiness is not just a void. It reveals the beauty of this world. And that beauty and that brilliance that is revealed when we begin to give up these games of I and other and the thoughts and the emotions that go with them, and we come back into awareness, that has a name in these teachings. It's called Ursel in Tibetan, Pravasvara in Sanskrit. Ursel, O with an umlaut over it, 2 dots, S-E-L. It means, means light, and sel means luminous. And that is used to describe all of this, the color of these cheeks, the sound of these words, the feeling of your bottom on the cushion. All of that is described when we begin to come back into this true world, absent the fictions of I and other and the stories that go with them. Then this world emerges as very, very luminous, brilliant. So emptiness is not just a sort of a void, an empty space. It reveals a fullness, the fullness of the phenomenal world and of your thoughts and everything. He calls it luminous emptiness, this unification of these two basic descriptors for reality. He says it's empty because it's free from fixations and hang-ups. It is luminous because after all the fixations are removed, what is left behind is fully realized experience, which is outstanding. He says in the Vajrayana, not only are you able to separate what should be rejected on the path from what should be accepted. What should be rejected is the neurosis of belief in I and other and all the attendant thoughts that go with it. You also experience brilliance, which produces delight and heartiness in a somewhat macho style, he says. And there's a name for this macho style. It's called Vajra pride. And it isn't like, I'm a big deal, that kind of pride. It's utter confidence in your sanity, that you can be utterly clear here, now. This is what's meant by Vajra pride. It's a confidence in that. Vajra pride is a very important aspect of the Vajrayana path, because what it means is certainty, confidence, lack of doubt. Doubt is just another little neurotic mechanism. And when that goes, the brilliance of this world is the Vajra pride. It's part of it, you might say. So he says, and this is really the key, it's almost a buzzword, emptiness is not a loss because it reveals fullness, the fullness of the phenomenal world, the beauty of it, sight, sound, smells, taste, touch, and mind, all of it arising so vividly. He says, in the Vajrayana, we're not like a patient recovering from an illness in the hospital, because in this case, the patient was never sick. We were sane all the time. We just didn't know it. We got distracted. We got lost in these dreams. It is more like getting a haircut, he says. You come out better, but it is not an ordeal. The whole thing is straightforward and quite delightful. So this waking up process isn't painful. It's not like having an operation to remove your gallbladder or something. It's really like getting cleaned up and really looking in the mirror and saying, wow, I look pretty good now that I've gotten my hair cut. What little there is to cut in my case. So talks about compassion as an expression of the union of luminosity and emptiness. That when one begins to experience this empty of neurosis, you might say, that lets luminosity glow, that luminosity is so beautiful. It awakens our heart with affection, with love, with sympathy. And it has a threatening aspect, but only to ego, to ego's unreasonability and selfishness. It threatens that. So he says it's almost a romantic feeling, this compassion that arises it's provoked, it's stimulated into being by the beauty of the world and by the absence of neurotic suffering. And then this love for the world and for other sentient beings. He says it's almost romantic. Indulgence in the sense of taking pride in your gentleness and softness, which can be harsh if necessary to do good, because that's your utter inspiration. The utter inspiration in all of this is to do good for the sake of other sentient beings, rousing bodhicitta, the mind of awakening. That's the motivation from beginning to end. And it only increases. The more we come into this world, the more we're inspired, according to these teachings, to be of benefit to others. And that being of benefit to others, that desire to do that, takes us down the path further and faster. The two work together. Our progress on the path and our desire to be of benefit to others. They increase each other. He said, all of this is based on the principle of devotion and loyalty to the lineage and to your Vajra master. And that's a difficult one. I mean, it's really, it's a very personal relationship that we could have with another human being and the lineage itself. And by devotion, what it means is that we become more and more convinced, more and more certain that this path is real, that it's not an imaginary creation, that it's not artificial, that it is reality that we are uncovering rather than something we're creating. So he talks now about abruptly cutting thoughts. We're talking about fundamental magic in the Vajrayana. There's the Hinayana discipline of one-pointedness, the Mahayana discipline of openness and compassionate non-territoriality, and Vajrayana magic. That magic has to do with the luminosity and the vividness of this world. That's the real meaning of this magic. It's not a matter of flying through the air or walking through walls. It's the extraordinary beauty that we can be tuned into. And what's necessary in order for us to see that is to come into a thoughtless state of mind. Abruptly, directly, on the spot, he says. This is called ordinary mind in the Kagyu tradition. It's called Rikpa in the Nyingma tradition. It's not quite ultimate. It's still a technique in a way. We are applying it. We're coming back from dreams into this clear, open awareness, which is Rikpa or Tamagi Shepa. They're both the same. They refer to this clarity of mind, devoid of thought, devoid of namtak. He says there are several stages to that process of cutting thoughts. First is an attitude of trust in your Vajra master and in the lineage. This becomes a source of magic to cut your thoughts. So it's really a matter of trust in the teachings and trust in those who embody those teachings. Cutting discursive thought. When the student has some faith in the Vajra master's ability to teach cutting thought, then the Vajra master begins to instruct the student in how to do this. And it's really a matter of more pointing out, that the teacher points out to the student when they're not thinking. We've done this a bit in this class, of just coming back into this clear, open awareness. This is a teaching that Trungpa Rinpoche gave to some of his students like me and others, and asked us to pass it on. So, talks about how cutting thought is symbolized in the tantric iconographies, especially of the wrathful deities, where you see them wearing necklaces of heads. And those necklaces of heads, those are the 52 or sometimes 50 or 51, depending on the system, thoughts that are categorized. There are different kinds of thoughts, and they've cut them off, and they're still fresh. and they're wearing them like a necklace. It's in mockery of thought, you might say, as an adornment. So first you cut the thoughts according to the instructions. You come back here. You realize that they don't come from anywhere, these thoughts. Find them. Find out where they came from. That's going to be a neat trick. Find out where they go. That's an even better trick. Can't do it. They don't come from anywhere. They don't go anywhere. Just like these words. Where did they come from? Where do they go? You realize that they are unceasing, constantly coming. They don't go anywhere. They're completely empty. So the magic is you see that they don't exist, but as they arise, they are complete emptiness, these thoughts. Completely empty of any truth or real being. A display, like on your television set. It's just like on your television set. These images, you know they're not real, and then when they're gone, and yet they can move us, right? You can get sad, you can get frightened, you can get excited by the images on your TV screen. And then they're over, you turn off the television and go to bed. And maybe they replay in your dreams at night. He says, in the Vajrayana, you cut your thoughts abruptly on the spot. How do you do that? You just come back. Now, here we are. It's that simple. You don't make a big deal out of it. If you make a big deal out of it, that's more thought. You just come back here to wherever here is and let it go. He says, that is the only magic there is. Cutting thoughts is the first way of blowing up the samsaric world, the world of confusion and suffering. There is more magic, though. It's also the vividness that is revealed. This combination of abruptness and devotion is the very important first step. So when you practice Vajrayana, the main point that runs through all the traditions, through every level of Vajrayana practice, is that you're able to cut your mental contents directly and abruptly. Right now. It's just that simple. And then thought comes back, but you can do it again. This is developing, as I said, Rigpa, as it's called in the Nyingma school, Tamalgishepa, ordinary mind, as it's called in the Kagyu school. It's essential to prepare for death, to have some understanding of this. When we die, we have an opportunity to awaken. The practice of Rigpa, remembering to come back into Rigpa, is called the child luminosity. It's the child because it's still underdeveloped. It's not completely developed. Then there is the mother luminosity, which is fully developed. And at the moment of death, after you have passed through the painful bardo of dying and everything has died, there is a moment when the child and the mother can unite. They say it's like a child leaping into its mother's lap. And that is the practice, losing that slight little edge of self-consciousness and becoming utterly 1000% real. And that is full enlightenment. In the Dharmakaya, in the Dharma body of the Buddha, at the moment of death. Many people haven't trained enough in this life, haven't recognized this enough, one way or another, and they miss that moment. And if they do, they pass on into the next bardo. Bardo means interval, it's an experience, it's a period of time. The bardo of reality. And in that bardo, they see the Sambhogakaya. The Dharmakaya is absolute reality in which nothing has any true existence. The Sambhogakaya is that the phenomenal world still communicates to us as it arises. And that communication, pure communication, without any substance, a tremendous vividness, is what's called Sambhogakaya. It's like the Dharmakaya is mind, Sambhogakaya is speech. And the bardo of reality, the bardo of Dharmata, is the realm of the Sambhogakaya. And in that realm, you can see the Sambhogakaya if, again, you have trained in coming back out of dreams. Dreams obscure it completely, utterly. But if you've come back with Rigpa, or TGS, Tamalgishepa, as we used to call it TGS, then you can see the bardo of reality. And what you're seeing is the phenomenal world as it arises in its most vivid symbolic form as deities, wrathful and peaceful. You also see the confused world. And you have another opportunity to achieve enlightenment. But if you can't stay in Rigpa and you keep devolving into dreams, then you'll move into the third bardo, which is the bardo of becoming. It's the bardo that's usually spoken of figuratively as being 49 days. And it's like a dream state. And in this bardo, this is the bardo of the Nirmanakaya, the manifestation body of the Buddha. And here there's no more opportunity or no less to achieve enlightenment than in our lives, which means probably not. And it's like a dream because you don't really have a body. It's a purely mental state. So it's very, very fraught, that experience of the bardo of becoming. One minute you could be in Timbuktu and the next minute you could be in Oshkosh, literally, in your dream. One minute, you can be old and one minute you could be young, although in the whole, you have the body of a 7-year-old child as you pass through this bardo, on your way to rebirth in the bardo of this life, which is the end of the bardo of death bardos, who take rebirth in one of the 6 realms. So, going back to Rigpa. Rigpa is the key to Tamalgishepa. Rigpa, clear awareness. We've done it here in practice. We can do it at any time. You can just come present. Come back from the dreams. Oh, I'm thinking about this. Oh, I'm thinking about that. Bang, you're back. However long. If you try and sustain it, you get caught up in the dream of sustaining. But you can flash it. And the more you flash it, the more you can stay in it. The more it becomes real. And this is what reveals this world as being sacred. And that's his next point. Sacred means, intellectually, you could say sacred means that this world is fundamentally of value. Experientially, sacred could mean this world is extraordinarily beautiful and vivid. Even a dog shit in the street. Everything. Vivid. So vivid and so here that it's beautiful. And when we tune into that, it wakes us up. It relieves us from our suffering, from our unhappiness. Bing, we're awake. We've come back from the dream of sorrow, the dream of being pissed off. You don't want to go into death in that state of mind. You want to go into death with some experience of Rigpa, of awakening. for those of us who are getting closer and closer. and there are quite a number of us. So he says, cutting the thoughts, passion, aggression, and ignorance. These are the three fundamental poisons, the fundamental neuroses: passion, aggression, and ignorance. Ignorance is not a good translation of it, of that word. The word ignorance is used also to translate the term avidya, marikpa in Tibetan, avidya in Sanskrit, which means that's the fundamental stupidity that creates ego and confusion and samsara altogether. This is a different kind of thing. This, what they're referring to as ignorance here, it's better translated as stupidity or indifference. And what it means is simply this, that when we believe in I and other, I'm here, others there, they can have three possible fundamental relationships. If I think that the other will augment or solidify or help me, neurotic me, be more solid, then I want to pull it to me, which is passion. I want to consume it. I want to become one with it. I want to devour it. If I think that that other is inimical, is threatening to my well-being or my existence, I want to push it away. That's hatred, aggression. And if it's neither plus or minus, neither for me or against me, just sort of neutral, then I'm indifferent and I don't care about it. And that is the third poison, which they translate as ignorance, is always translated, but it's better translated as something like indifference. So these are the three root defilements, kleshas, they're called, the three poisons. And cutting these is more difficult than cutting just mental contents, like what's for lunch? Oh, there's Frank, and I like Frank. It's more difficult to cut the poisons because they are more fundamental, more deep. And so the way to do it is to paralyze them. He says you try and throw out a much bigger zap, and he gasps sharply, it says in the text, which comes from the understanding of the sacredness of the Vajrayana world. That this world is fundamentally sacred, beautiful, vivid, alive. There are no reasons for this sacredness. Things are just intrinsically that way. And what it's up to us to do is to discover it, not to create it. So we accept this world simply as it is, just as a simple world, a full world, a bright world, a shining world, brilliant world, a healthy world. The Vajrayana approach is a basic healthiness. You're actually able to cut through those root kleshas, which is the best magic of all. But sometimes we experience this vividness, this extraordinary beauty and vividness of the world. And that is the real meaning of magic. It penetrates us, it moves us, and it goes completely beyond thought. And then he says, this is a good one, worthy of contemplation. Usually passion, aggression, and ignorance, the three poisons, occur through the inspiration of cheapness. You're sort of cheap, you want something from me and you're not willing to give stuff away. It says, because you don't experience any of the room around you that is very unintelligent. It is as though you're in a restaurant and unaware of anything around you. You find yourself sitting on your plate and consuming your little world. You're not even sitting on your chair. Sitting on your plate. And so when we take this approach to the three poisons of seeing them, you let them go. And you come back. This is called ransacking the kleshas. You're throwing them out. He says magic happens at the level when you begin to loot the privacy of passion, aggression, and ignorance. We keep them private. We hide them. We don't want to tell anybody about them. Or if we do, we only tell a person who we think will share that same feeling. But we don't want to expose ourselves. So when you cut thoughts on the spot so thoroughly, you're cutting your karma. Karma lives in thought and emotion. That's where it lives. Karma, it binds us. You don't like this person, so you get bound into an act of revenge or hatred or aggression. And if you don't act aggressively towards that person, you're still fighting it, and you're still a victim of the karma. As long as you have those thoughts and feelings, those kleshas, and you cut that by coming back into the present, which is what he's calling looting. Looting the kleshas. You come back here. You see that it was just a dream, and that this is what's real. That can be so hard because we're so habituated to certain kinds of poisons. They're buried in our alaya vijnana, our storehouse consciousness, these reactions to certain kinds of people and events. He says, interestingly, during sitting meditation in the Vajrayana, you practice the Hinayana style of shamatha vipassana. It's what we do. Go out with the breath and dissolve, which reinforces the state of healthiness in your mind. Although recently, I remembered actually, that the style in which we do Mahayana practice, shamatha vipassana, going out with the breath and dissolving, the out breath dissolving into space, and then here we are. This is a very Vajrayana style. In fact, it's a great perfection style, the highest level of the Vajrayana. He says, then in post-meditation experience, you can zap into that state of mind. Just come back into it. You have to be awake and aware all 24 hours of every day. Now there's an aspiration. How many of us can do that? Not I. He says, especially with beginning Vajrayana practitioners, there's no relaxation at all. You are being fed by the energy that exists around you, which could be the equivalent of relaxation. That energy is your personal passion, aggression, and ignorance. It is the 5 Buddha family principle of energy. I think that in conclusion, Michael's going to finish this off, but I guess what I would like to emphasize about all this is that within awareness, this world is seen extraordinarily vividly. And that quality of luminosity, vividness, cell, light, luminous, cell, is the real meaning of the magic. And it occurs when we come back out of neurotic mind. And we do that all the time. Because neurotic mind is a creation. It has a beginning and end. I want, I think, I feel, I hate, I love, I. And all those statements have beginnings and ends. And there are gaps between them. Sometimes those gaps are just an instant. Other times they can stretch. And I think all of us can think of times when those gaps have stretched. And we have seen this world as beautiful and luminous for an more extended period of time. So that's it for this first part of the chapter. And Michael, you can take it away.
Okay, so Begin by just saying something a little more about the Vajra pride that John was talking about. Experience of Vajra pride is beyond, with Rigpa or ordinary mind, what we're talking about is the fundamentally true nature of our minds, fundamentally awake quality of our mind. As we've been reading about all along in the Vajrayana, we are fully realized Buddhas in our true nature. And Vajra pride is coming to not simply identify or have allegiance to that, although it includes those things, but that there's no separation at all, that we are awake, we are um, fully realized Buddhas in our true nature. And so I want to begin by just emphasizing the simplicity of the meditation practice we do and taking a moment just to rest in that simplicity. It's actually said that one reason we don't recognize our true nature is precisely because it is so simple. Another reason is that it's so close. And so if we just take a moment to take good posture and just settle into this moment, here and now, slow down, and simply allow ourselves to be open, aware, awake. And what we experience, what we can experience if we just let go, is things as they are, ourselves as we are. What gets in the way is thinking that there's something we have to find, or that we should experience something different, or that we have some idea of what it should be. And we can actually let all of that go. It's so much simpler than that. We can just simply allow ourselves to be here and now. And so the more we appreciate the simplicity of the practice that we're doing, the more we become aware that anything we do to try to manipulate our experience, control our experience, evaluate our experience, obscures, creates agitation and restlessness, and doesn't allow us to settle into our true nature, which is Repa, ordinary mind, nowness, wakefulness. In any case, this last section of the chapter is Vajrayana sayings. And it begins by saying there are several sayings related to the discovery of transcending habitual patterns. And what's important to understand here is when we talk about habitual patterns, we're not simply talking about the little ways that we might organize our lives, what we might do typically every morning, although it includes that, because we can get very attached to our little routines. But he's talking about as well about very deep habitual patterns, that our tendency to believe in a self, our tendency to judge our experience immediately in terms of pleasant, unpleasant, and elaborate from there. Our tendency to see the world in terms of I and other, in the dualistic sense. And that, again, in meditation practice, what we're doing is relaxing all of these different efforts of mind, all of these different habitual patterns for how we try to manipulate and control our experience so that we can just simply be in meditation practice. And that's really what these sayings are pertaining to in terms of transcending habitual patterns. It's just allowing ourselves to, again, not be separate from our wakeful nature. The first one is Rigpa free of sem, which he translates as insight that is departed or separated from the mind, or insight free of mind. And I think what we need to understand here is exactly what sem means. And we actually discussed sem way back in the Path of Individual Liberation. There's a chapter there titled Transcending Dualistic Mind, where he defines sem as that which can associate with other. And he gives us a Tibetan phrase, yul la sem pena sem, which means with sem meaning other or projection. So yul la sem pena means mind is that which can think of other or projection. And he says that mind is, in this sense, is also referred to as ego. Like mind, ego can only survive on reference points, not by itself. And he says that sem on this level is the equivalent of mind as we generally think about mind. Instead of thinking of using the word mind as a noun, we could use it as a verb, as in minding your own business. He says you can't have mind, sem, without an object of mind, so they work together. That minding, and he says this, minding is an active process. So rather than thinking of it as a thing, we should think of it as an activity, a verb. And this is one of the fundamental habitual patterns that we have when we get caught up in sem. We project a sense of other and then elaborate that with all kinds of reference points and points of view and judgments as to pleasant, unpleasant, desirable, or undesirable. We grasp after things based on this fundamental split into I and other. It says, sem perpetually thinks, perpetually schemes. And this is the mind that causes us to be fascinated by the world, or for that matter, to be turned off by the world. In other words, once we have sem, we have a sense of I and other, then we have judgments, we have activities, actions based on those judgments. Actually, in another section of the Mahayana book, calls it an echo chamber of reference points. So we become very confused, and our awareness becomes bound up, obscured by these reference points and by our, the energy that we direct into all of these activities. So with Rigpa, we're free of that. Rigpa is, again, the fundamentally awake nature of mind, that we cut thoughts not by repressing them, but by seeing through them. The thoughts become transparent. We see their empty nature, their shunyata nature, as John was talking about. We see them in their true nature, rather than grasping after them and getting caught up in them, acting on them, solidifying them, looking for further reference points that solidify thought further. So that he says that Rigpa is insight that is free from thinking about something else, free from perceiving the other. It's non-dualistic. It's just direct perception. It's that experience right on the spot. So that increasingly, as we come to recognize our Rigpa nature, we become increasingly able to rest in that nature, recognize that nature, be in that nature, without engaging in all of the activity of sem, all of the work of reference points and judgments and evaluations based on, again, a fundamental belief in I and other. So we become free of that. Ultimately, it's Rigpa that recognizes Rigpa. It's awareness that recognizes itself. And again, this is because when we're fully able to be in this experience, there's only the seeing, the being. And there's only awareness that illuminates everything. So Rigpa, free of sem, free of any sense of I and other, free of any sense of reference point, complete non-reference point. So that's the first Vajrayana saying. The second one is Buddha without breath. And he says this one's difficult to understand, which he says it means that the Buddha doesn't gasp or become short of breath. The Buddha does not depend on saying, whew. He says this saying is connected with being wakeful. All of these sayings are connected with being wakeful. He says you can become a Buddha whether you're dead or alive, which I think relates back to what John was saying about the Bardo teachings, that at any moment we can wake up. And one point of the Bardo teachings is even in the Bardo, we can recognize the nature of our mind, even the moment after death, let alone any moment in this lifetime, here and now, where we can let go of thoughts, cut thoughts, and simply be awake, be present, right on the spot. And the reason for this is that when we really look at the nature of awareness, when we look at the nature of wakeful mind, we discover that it doesn't come from anything. It's unborn. And when we actually look at the experience of mind, we realize that it never stops. It's unceasing as well. The contents of particular thoughts may change and come and go, but the fundamentally awake nature, the fundamentally aware nature of mind is unceasing and unborn. And for that reason, there's a continuity, which we've talked about before. That Tantra means continuity. And the continuity is of awareness, whether we're aware of it or not. It's always there. And so I think that that might be another way to understand something about Buddha without breath. It's a way of really pointing to the unborn nature of awareness, that it doesn't come from anything, it doesn't depend on anything. Because when we get caught up in particular thoughts, we may lose that sense of unbornness because we're caught up in the particular points of view, a particular reference point. But when we look at the essence of mind, the essence of what it is that we're experiencing from moment to moment, separate from, when we were able to remain undistracted by the contents of thoughts and feelings, but just resting in the awareness, then we see that it's unborn and unceasing. And for that reason, at any time we can wake up, even in the Bardo, after death, which is what the entire Tibetan Book of the Dead is about. The third saying is meditation without thought but luminous. So this is meditation, again, without thought, without sem, without discursive mind, but at the same time luminous. And as John said, this luminous quality of mind is awake. It's a quality of vividness, quality of freshness, a quality of immediacy. It goes beyond any kind of concept. It goes beyond any particular reference point. And what Trungpa Rinpoche says here is that this idea of luminosity is just opposed to just emptiness or the absence of duality alone. That he says when we begin to look beyond duality, again, we're able to see beyond sam, beyond mind that depends on reference points of this and that, I and other. We see that it's not just empty and non-existent, that there's a alive, vivid, fresh quality to our awareness. We begin to realize that beyond egohood, there's still tremendous vitality, strength, and energy. And this aliveness and energy is luminous and bright, and it contains tremendous wisdom. And so he says the basic point of Vajrayana experience, the Vajrayana approach to emptiness or egolessness, is that it's not purely annihilation, but it goes beyond annihilation. It goes beyond nihilism, you could say. That, again, the quality of awareness is vividly awake, completely open and knowing, unfixated. That the nature of mind fundamentally is free. And at the same time, it can't be grasped because it's beyond concept or label. When we try to grasp awareness, what happens is we end up dealing with the thought of the previous moment. And again, in going back to the path of individual liberation, when he talks about the Vipassana experience, what he says is that whatever we realize, whatever we experience, we immediately disown. Because when we try to grasp, again, then we're relating to the past, maybe the past of just the previous moment. But it's actually the disowning, the letting go, the letting be, that allows the continuity to become manifest to us. It's there, but we won't recognize it so long as we're caught up in some effort to hold on, some effort to create something, some concept of what we think we should be experiencing, instead of simply relating to what we actually are experiencing. And interestingly enough, he actually talked about luminosity as well in the path of individual liberation as one of the fundamental niyams, which the key point is they're temporary experiences, he says, that are landmarks of one's growth, So that what we begin to experience in flashes or glimpses through our practice. But again, it's tricky if we try to hang on to them. They're actually temporary, so we can't hang on to them. But that basically the term for luminosity, selwa or oso, is like brilliant light or clarity. But this doesn't mean that we literally see a brilliant light, he says. It means we're able to work with a tremendous amount of energy. We're able to make things workable. There is tremendous confidence in light, a far-seeing quality, panoramic vision. So this is the experience of luminosity beyond thought. And we're able to completely let go and let the open, free, vivid, immediately awake, vibrant quality of mind manifest. And we could do this right now. Whatever we have in front of us right now, again, if we're all in the same room, this would be easier, but whether it's the computer, whether it's a lamp, the wall, pictures, whatever you have in front of you, you can just see that for a moment as fresh experience, not the idea of the lamp or the idea of the wall, but actually or the idea of the picture, the idea of the computer, but just the actual computer, the actual wall, right here and now. Just take a moment to do that. So much of the time we're relating to the world around us through the filter of concepts, that we have an idea of the thing. It's the same thing we've always seen. And so we're not experiencing a sense of freshness, immediacy, or nowness in our experience. But we always can, if we just remember to do that, if we just allow ourselves to relax, if we just allow ourselves to settle into the immediate experience. So that's when we're able to experience meditation without thought, without being caught up in reference point and concept, but just rest in the immediacy, the luminosity, of the vibrancy, the vividness of present experience. And again, it's very simple. We don't need to go looking for it. We just need to simply let it be. We just need to simply open up. We just need to simply let go. There's nothing that we need to create. So the next saying is action without fixation or desire. Action without fixation or desire. It says usually when we act in order to get something. But that's the samsaric approach to action, that we're looking to get something. We're trying to make something happen. We're trying to get some result. But he says, but in this case, action without fixation or desire, we're talking about spontaneous action, which he relates to skillful means, bodhisattva activity, and working for the sake of others. And he says that this kind of action is not based on ego fixation or the desire for attainment of any kind of pleasure. So it's pure action. So another way we could think about this, get at the same thing in maybe a different way, is to say that this is action that comes out of nowness. It comes out of things as they are, not things as we wish they are, not things seeing things based on habitual patterns from our past, and not based on any kind of intention for the future, but being present right here and now so that we can act without fixation or desire. There's a sense of nowness that we can experience is actually involves forgetting about time in the sense of a concept, that we don't, it's not that we try to be present, but we just rest in, as he talked about 2 chapters back, the fourth moment, which is free of time. And we're actually able to rest in fourth moment, which free of a sense of past or future. We realize that the present, when we're fully present, that it has no beginning or end, that the eternal present is really the only moment that there is. And so I'll just repeat again how he described fourth moment. I think this is about 2 chapters back. He says the first 3 moments are past, present, and future. And then there is a fourth moment that transcends all 3. This moment is a pure moment that is not connected with what you have missed, what you are experiencing, or what you expect is about to happen. The fourth moment is a pure state of consciousness. It is clear and pure and free from habitual tendencies. So again, it's just what we experience when we're present without reference to past or future, and without even any kind of reference or evaluation of the present moment. Just, again, simple being. Then the final saying is view without desire. Which he doesn't really say that much about. It's view, he defines view as referring to a metaphysical view or attitude beyond wanting. But I think what we're talking about here is a view that, again, is completely involved in the immediacy of the present moment. It's completely what we experience when there's no sense of separation between us and our awake nature. There's no sense of, as we talked about in Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, of the duality of experience or experiencer. It's purely just the immediate experience. And this is beyond hope and fear. It's free of any kind of goal orientation. It's just simple being without, free of any kind of reference point. And he says that all of these experiences, all of these things are blessings of the Guru. That the Guru is the one who bestows the insight free from mind, that he makes us Buddha without breath, that teaches us meditation without thought but luminous, that shows us action free from fixation and desire, and shows us the view free from desire. So it's the Guru who points these things out. And speaking for myself, I certainly would not have recognized these things on my own. That even though ultimately all of these experiences are really beyond concept, it's the skillful means of the Guru to use words that point us toward these things, and then we can let go and actually experience them. So he says it's not a zap. It's not like something from the outside, but rather when students develop these qualities, the teachers can tune into them more. And in that way, students can short circuit their past, present, and future and begin to see fourth moment on the spot. That seems to be the idea of blessings here. Again, that students can short circuit past, present, and future and begin to see fourth moment, pure consciousness, right on the spot. And that's the idea of the blessings that we experience from the Guru. He says these 5 sayings are commentary to our previous, commentary relative to our previous discussion in the last chapter of ordinary low and transcendent low and freedom from habitual patterns. Particularly, again, the very subtle, very deep habitual patterns of belief in an ego, seeing the world in terms of I and other in a mindless way, becoming caught up in reference points, distracted, absorbed in thoughts and dreams. These habitual patterns that certainly have followed us through this lifetime, and as what the teachings say, lifetime after lifetime. These are the very deep, subtle habitual patterns that almost just become background if we're not aware of them, if we don't settle enough to actually look at our experience and realize that they are patterns, that we actually can see through them or beyond them. He says when there are no habitual patterns, there's always insight free from mind. There's always Buddha without breath, meditation without thought but luminous, and so on. When there are no habitual patterns, there's always these things. And he says these sayings are basic reference points for how we can attain freedom from habitual patterns and mental concepts. He says they're not necessarily fruition, but they describe how we begin at the beginning. And he says through these, we definitely become non-theistic. We begin to see through our wantingness and desire. And he says wantingness and desire are the biggest obstacles and blockages of all. We have a problem with wanting and desire, with wanting to achieve something, wanting to refer back to our habitual patterns to make sure that what we're doing is right. This is even in a very subtle and yet important sense in meditation practice. Am I meditating right? And is this what I should be experiencing? Could I be experiencing something better? We need to let go of all of that and just allow ourselves to simply be in what our experience actually is. So again, a sense of simplicity. And then he ends by saying that on the basis of all 5 of these Vajrayana sayings, and because we begin to see through our wantingness and desire, then the 4 reminders arise, which is the precious human birth, free and well-favored, the sense of impermanence or death, the cause and effect of karma, and the suffering of samsara. So I think There are a lot of different ways we could approach that. And I would also say that the four reminders are sometimes called the four thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma. Might be another way to understand this. And the point is that we come to appreciate the preciousness of the opportunity we have now to wake up and realize that that opportunity is not endless, that there is impermanence. We realize something about karma, which manifests in the habitual patterns that we've been talking about tonight. And we realize that ultimately being caught up in ego mind produces suffering that we wish to transcend. So that was what I came tonight to say. And I think at this point we could have some discussion. Wayne?
Hi, thanks for the talk, guys. Yeah, I wanted to like to go more into depth on this subject of Vajra pride, because Vajra pride, it can really help to create a kind of continuity. But I've also experienced how ego can infiltrate Vajra pride, creating a kind of delusion. It seems like Vajra pride needs to maybe be accompanied by humility at the same time. But then again, I've also experienced how ego can infiltrate humility, creating a kind of false humility or self-deprecation, and you don't want that. So at any rate, I guess I'm asking um, for any suggestions on how to experience Vajra pride in a more pure form without ego getting in the way.
I think the important thing is recognizing what's in our mind on the spot. That if there's a sense of attachment, a sense of grasping, a sense that we need to create something, that that's the sign that we've fallen into something that we're trying to create, rather than simply allowing our natural being to express itself. I think that's why he said so much about wantingness and desire. As part of the his description of the of the five sayings.
So is just watching ego sufficient? Just bringing that into our sense of awareness?
No, I think Vajra pride also includes understanding that we are Buddha and that we don't need to create it. In fact, we can't. We can't improve ourselves. Really, it's a matter of discovering what we've been missing and ignoring all this time and coming back to that with effortlessness because it's already there. And then we get caught up again in thoughts about self and other, and it takes us away from that, and then we come back.
Thanks, that's perfect. Yeah. It's always there. You don't have to create it. I like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's magical, isn't it? That what we're doing is we're discovering that we were what we were seeking all along. We don't believe it. We have a lack of faith in ourselves, in our being. And that's what creates suffering and the belief in lie. Vajrayana in particular is all about discovering the fact that we are Buddha, always have been, always have been. So
Yeah.
powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this relates to what Lan was saying too, but it certainly I think relates to a lot. The, the way I've kind of put it together in my mind and through, I'm sure these aren't my words originally, but it kind of all comes down to liberation through non-clinging. You know, the whole thing is about non-clinging to concepts, not clinging to the outcome, non-clinging. You know, I think this our sense of our illusion of this sense of a fixed sense of self is, you know, clinging to that concept, and it's clinging to our thoughts. You know, just clinging, believing our thoughts. You know, in order to get lost, I was thinking before, in order to get lost in a story, in a movie, or in a book that you're reading, you know, we call it, you know, the literary, you know, reference to it is, you know, suspension of disbelief, because we have to suspend our ideas that I don't believe this, you know, this can't possibly be true. We suspend that when we're watching either a fantasy or any kind of movie or story. But with thoughts, I think it comes down to a suspension of belief, because my problem is I believe everything I think, and then I reify it, you know, and I cling to it, and it becomes solid, and it becomes another obfuscation for nowness, you know, for right here. My 2 cents.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. It's good.
To say on a relative level, what helps with thoughts is just the clear seeing of Vipassana, that we kind of see that from moment to moment we take something seriously, and then later on it's gone as a thought altogether. That it had any reality, any solidity, it would be there. But because it is empty, what's important now, 5 minutes later, we don't even think about anymore. And we even see that we relate to thoughts in different ways. Sometimes we think that we are our thoughts, and other times we see thoughts as something other that are coming at us. They're as, almost something unwanted or whatever. So that we realize that I think all those things just begin to loosen or begin to see through our tendency to just buy into thoughts and identify with thoughts in kind of a mindless way. And this just comes out of a Vipassana experience, just looking at what we actually experience and seeing the changing nature, the empty nature of thoughts.
just quickly, before John, when you said that ignorance is not really a great interpretation of it, I heard one teacher, I forgot who, call it, instead of ignorance, he called it misknowing. Misknowing. Yeah.
Yeah, the usual word that ignorance is translating is avidya or mavrikpa, which means not seeing the truth, reality, which is very fundamental. But this particular term, passion, aggression, and ignorance, is not as deep as that. That has already occurred, that fundamental mistake. And now this is a complication. Well, Trip.
So I was just thinking about Lane's question about kind of the check and balance on Vajra pride, and it seems a question. I guess seems to me that a check on the ego has to do with the statement that I really liked was utter confidence in my sanity, is how you put it, and that Vipassana and clear seeing is really the pathway to being able to see things clearly and distinguish between that which is sane and not sane. And that would be the way that I believe I would hold the Vajra pride in check so that it doesn't move into a more arrogant or egoistic approach, not that kind of puffed up pride, but the clear seeing confidence in one's sanity. I mean, that is what Vajra pride is, correct?
Yeah, terrific confidence in your sanity.
And in order to have confidence, well, in order to know what is sane in my own sanity, really depends on clear seeing, Vipassana.
Does indeed. Absolutely. Yeah, agree. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. That's great. Vipassana is the path, and it just gets deeper and deeper. It's funny, the practice basically stays the same, this coming back present here in this space, but the name of the practice changes because the more one does this practice, the more one's understanding of who I am, this thing here, and what other is out there changes. And so the name for the practice changes as the understanding of what the world is changes. And it becomes Shunyata practice, it becomes Mahamudra, it becomes Dzogchen practice. And it's still always the same thing that we're doing in our group of coming into this present moment with awareness. But it deepens, becomes more powerful. Jane.
I get hung up on where in this whole schema is feelings, because feelings is not mind and it's not thought. So if we are feeling, let's say we come back, we're meditating and we come back and we have a feeling of euphoria or a feeling of sadness. Is that in a different, where do we put that in this construct? It's not, is it insight? Is it Ripka? What is it? I mean, we have feelings. We're sentient feeling human beings. Can someone speak to that? That's where I get
It's still thought. I mean, thought is not a good. It's a mental event. There are the 52. I described the necklace. Some of those are thoughts of anger, hatred, thoughts of labeling, thoughts of saying, I prefer this over that. All kinds of thoughts of understanding, but it's a mental event. And the emotions are the more powerful mental events. And again, the wrathful deities wear them as ornaments, especially. They've got the 52 around their neck, and then there are the emotions, which they usually wear as a crown. It's like wearing them as ornaments. And there are 5 heads on the crown for 5 fundamental emotions. These are from the Buddha families. It depends on which system you're using, but they got 5 on their crown. So they're still part of neurosis, but they can be transformed by clear seeing and giving up of I other games, which usually are what drive the emotions. I other games, I hate that person because they blah, blah, blah. I love this other one because so-and-so, Michael, do you have anything to add to this?
It's actually a great question, and it's getting a little late, but essentially, yes, the idea is that any mental event in its fundamental nature is an expression of awake mind. Now, we may not see it that way because it gets filtered through all kinds of reference points and fixations and attachment. But when we're able to just be with the experience without elaborating further or trying to change it in any way, then the emotions are available to us as energy. And we can just be with that experience without having to make it any different, without having to stop it, without having to elaborate it, without having to be absorbed in it or caught up in it. And when we're able to do that, then the energy of the emotions, is open energy. It's unfixated. The problem is we tend to relate to the emotions from the point of view of I and other, and then we get caught up in all those reference points and all of the things that go along with that. I'm not sure I said it very well, but that's
I understand it in my head, but I'm thinking we also talk, or there's so much about feelings of compassion, empathy. Those are feeling words. They're not mind, and I don't believe they're ego. And we want to have those feelings. I mean, I think that's part of the path we're following, is to be able to feel those feelings.
Well, actually, we are those feelings when we're able to let go. We don't have, the compassion is a natural expression of awakened mind. It doesn't need to be cranked up particularly. Just when we relate to the world, with open mind, it comes about naturally.
So I appreciate that. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing in a way.
Well, there's more, and we could talk about it tomorrow in the discussion group. The emotions in the Vajrayana and Tantra are transformed into wisdoms. Each one has a particular wisdom of sanity, of enlightened mind that it's true. We could talk about how that's done and what constitutes the emotions. And but we should end now because we're past 7 or past 9 or 6, wherever you happen to be.
Come tomorrow night.
Yeah, we could talk. This is deep, powerful stuff. I mean,
we'll answer that question in just a couple minutes.
Yeah, and there's a lot of teaching about transforming the emotions into wisdom. In fact, is there a line in one of the chants we do? I think there is, about transforming the emotions into wisdom. So we can talk about it. So I'll put the chants up. Meg, are you going to lead us? Is Meg here? I can't see. Yes. And I'll mute all. Peace. So Meg, unmute yourself.
We'll close with a prayer for peace, and then we'll dedicate the merit earned by our practice for the benefit of all sentient beings. By the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times and my prayers of pure aspiration, may wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all other maladies dissolve in this world, and may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy of wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdom's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy a profound, brilliant glory.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Michael, John, and everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
John and Michael. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
And Michael.
Thank you.
Night.
Wayne. Good night, Trip. Thank you.
Questions?
Night, John.
Good night.